Good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us is University of Missouri Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
As we talk today, it is Wednesday afternoon. It's a shortened trading week. Markets are closed tomorrow. We have a shortened trading day on Friday. So as we get into these discussions and talk a little market commentary, just so everybody knows, it's just through Wednesday midday. So as we get started, let's talk about what's happened this week in the market so far.
Yeah, if we start on the cattle side, if we look at cash-fed cattle, I'll say they're up about 50 cents in this lightened week. If we look at live cattle futures for the current month, I would say they're up about 75 cents for the week thus far. On the feeder cattle side, feeder cattle down roughly $2 to $7 for the week, with the exception of some lightweight calves that were actually higher relative to a week ago level. Those feeder cattle futures, those for the current month have been about $2 higher thus far for the week. If we look at the meat side of the cattle complex, the choice beef cutout value about $2.30 lower for the week. We've really seen a weakness across the board in all cuts except ribs. But I remind us, despite larger beef production numbers, that we're talking about choice beef cutout value that's still almost 12% above where we stood a year ago at this time. On the pork side, cash hog prices were also down about 75 cents for the week. Current month lean hog futures showed a little strength this week, up about 50 cents. When we look at the pork cutout value, it was up for the week. It is also running about 11% above year-ago levels. I will say up about 66 cents for the week. And thank goodness for those pork bellies, up about $9.50 for the week. That now makes, Megan, about 20 straight days of higher pork belly prices and up about 45 cents from their low that they found back on October 25th. So some nice strength there, especially when you see ham prices continue to weaken a little bit. We're down about $2.60 on ham prices for the week, and those ham prices are about 15% below year-ago levels, while bellies today now are back sitting about 40% higher than where they were a year ago at this time.
Scott, it's really interesting. We talked last Friday, obviously following the cattle on feed report, waiting to see what happened Monday morning. It's nice to see those cattle futures rebound back after the big step back that they took following Friday's report. The light trade volume helped to maybe enhance some of that movement that we've seen so far this week.
Yeah, I think absolutely, because when you look at Monday, we did start off pretty tough in those cattle markets, and it was nice to see some bounce back as we've come Tuesday and Wednesday as well.
Really, the big story this week, Scott, a couple of reports from USDA today. Starting off first, let's look at cold storage. As we take a look at those numbers, where are our livestock stocks, and what does that mean for producers?
Yeah, so I think, I'll say a little bit of mixed bag when we look at what we got out of cold storage. If we start on the red meat side here to begin with, pork stocks still below year-ago levels. The nice news there is that's the 21st consecutive month where we've been below year-ago levels. Now, we're starting to come closer to those year-ago levels. When you look at the October data, we're only 0.3% below last year when you look at those stocks. Even on the beef side of the equation, so beef stocks almost 5% below year-ago levels, and again, the 9th consecutive month that we've been below year-ago levels. So tells me on the red meat side, despite the fact that we are going to talk about much higher production levels, stocks have remained very limited or light, if you will, and been helpful, I think, to market prices. If we switch gears and talk a little bit about the poultry side, I think that's the one that we have to continue to pay attention to. Poultry stocks for October set 12.3% above year-ago levels. I think when you look at what's been happening the last couple of months on the poultry side, it's the one that we are seeing just an increase. We look back to September, they were up 8%, August up 5.3%. Now we're sitting here at 12.3%. Those stocks can overhang markets for a while, and we'll have to wait and see where we go on the poultry side, but it's a very different situation relative to what we've seen in the pork and beef complexes.
While there is, especially as we talk about the pork stocks, and we'll talk a little bit more about the poultry side of things too, but we're seeing creep up a little bit while they're still below year-ago levels. With this month, it's really not much below where they were a year ago. Does that whole demand conversation and trade conversation come into play too, to make sure that we're finding a place for our products?
It certainly does, Megan. I'll always say, when you think about the fact that we're up 4 or 5% in pork production this year, and yet we're below year-ago levels on pork stocks. When we have those higher production levels, I'd expect a few more stocks of pork products in the freezer. So the fact that we've stayed below year-ago levels, frankly, just tells you demand seems to be running very nicely relative to the expanded supply situation we're seeing on the pork side. We will have to continue to watch that, and as you correctly point out, we're slowly making ourselves head back towards year-ago levels, and we don't need any big jumps in pork ending stocks or beef ending stocks, for that matter, when you see what we're doing on the production side of the equation.
And apparently we don't need any disruption in trade activity either.
Absolutely correct. When I talk to producers these days, that's one of the things I remind them. I can find so many things on my one hand that would make prices move lower, among them being some type of shutdown of exports. Yet on the other hand, trying to find those things that would make prices move higher, those things are much more limited. So it's very careful. We have to be very careful we keep the demand side moving forward as we look ahead.
Scott, I want to touch a little bit on the poultry stocks. As we see them at 12.3% above year-ago levels, how problematic is that when we look at competition within the proteins?
Yeah. So number one, there is competition among those meat proteins. I have tended to say, currently there's less cross effect from poultry products into the beef and pork markets, but when you get prices far enough apart, then where I think you can see some competition, and so we will have to pay attention to that. I think you can see a situation where perhaps even some of the restaurants are going to find some featuring of those poultry products more interesting than perhaps pork or beef products. And if that occurs, that kind of menu switching doesn't occur back very quickly as well. And so that's the concern. If at some point they make that switch towards those cheaper products, chicken products that we see out there, that probably is tough on beef and pork markets for a while as well.
The other report out today, Scott, Livestock Slaughter, and if anybody had any questions about growth in the pork and beef sectors, those were easily answered today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can continue to tape these words of it's an all-time monthly record high for red meat production in October. I think we'll get to say that for a while as we move ahead as well. Total red meat production at 4.64 billion pounds in October. That surpassed the August of 2017 record of 4.63 billion pounds. I think we're going to continue to see some growth as we move ahead, even on the pork side. So a little bigger spread there. Pork production at an all-time record of 2.32 billion pounds of pork that we produced in October. That compares to the 2.27 billion pounds back in March of this year. So a lot of production on the marketplace is certainly what we see out of that livestock slaughter report.
Slaughter totals were up as well, but when we take a look at those, Scott, what do we see? How do we take into consideration, or when we take into consideration the weights of those animals being slaughtered?
Yeah, so if we start on the cattle side for a minute, total cattle slaughter up 6% in the October report. We came in at 2.8 million head of cattle slaughtered in October. Yet beef production in October, although higher, only 4% higher. So the 20-pound decline in weights relative to a year ago has been really helpful to those markets. We had started kind of the process of moving weights closer to year-ago levels, and out of the October report, we spread that back apart again. So very helpful on the cattle side in particular, even on the pork side. So yes, hog slaughter at 11 million head was also about 5% higher, but at least when you look at the hog weight side, relative to a month ago, we were unchanged in hog weights. And I was looking back through the data just a little bit because seasonally we always tend to go higher on those weights. And, for the first time, I think since the 1950s, we actually were unchanged from September to October. It's certainly a very different situation than the normal seasonal increase in hog slaughter weights that we see.
I think even as you take a look at those weekly slaughter totals or daily slaughter totals, I know I look at them every day. We're seeing increased weekly slaughter or daily slaughter numbers.
Yep.
And year ago levels. But the one day we're not seeing an increase is on Saturdays.
Yep. Thank goodness for all that new processing capacity that's trying to come on board. I think, that's one of the ways when you notice Saturday kills, really down about 25% relative to where we were a year ago. And in fact, I would say you look at the hog weights and this idea that we actually just were flat from September to October tells me that additional processing capacity is keeping us pretty current in hog markets, despite we slaughtered 5% more hogs in October this year than we did a year ago. So that processing capacity is certainly playing out positively, I think, for producers as we look here at 2017.
And imagine that when they get them up and running at full capacity, because they're still running at partial capacity right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to look for the next couple of years of some pretty strong pull for hogs to hang on the shackle space that's going to come on board as we look ahead. So again, a very different situation. Thank goodness we have grown processing capacity in the hog side, because I think right now we would be struggling if we hadn't added that new capacity this year.
Scott, anything else this week?
I think we've covered the major topics for this shortened week, Megan.
All right. Have a great weekend. Have a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Yes, same to you as well. And I hope that you get a little bacon wrapped around the turkey this Thanksgiving period.
I will always take bacon. Good. To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday, visit our website, brownfieldagnews.com. Click on the subscribe link. You can also submit questions and comments there as well. And for market updates twice daily, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great Thanksgiving. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next Friday. I'm Megan Grebner on Brownfield.